On the healing bench today is another Cyberman head, this time an Earthshock variant that has direct lineage to the Imagineering originals from 1982. This one is part of a full mannequin display item that took a bit of a tumble one night and did itself a fair amount of mischief. Most notably, one of the resin handlebars has snapped right through when it hit the ground, and as a result is missing some material. Where it connects to the upper head, the fiberglass is broken out, so that's going to need a bit of redressing and tidying up. The vat-formed mouthpiece is loose, as is the eye mesh, but that's an easy fix. And all over it are a number of scuff marks in the paintwork, including a rather large and nasty section on the backplate that has clearly reacted to the neoprene face tube detailing, but these are nothing too much to worry about. You know, with all the cyber heads that I've had to repair over the last few years, I'm now giving serious thought to opening a Cyberman hospital. Regardless of that, grab yourself a drink and some nibbles, get yourself comfortable, and let's crack on with the job. As always, the first thing to do on a repair job like this is to make it look even worse by completely stripping it down. I'm starting with the mouthpiece as that's pretty much already fallen off, as has the brow blanking plate. The earhole mesh I'm going to leave alone as it's on there pretty securely, just as the backplate mesh is, but the eye mesh is going to have to come out as it's already lifting and parting company with the head all of its own accord. Next up is the headlamp. This simply unbolts just like the handlebars, and is why I like this type of Cyberman design. It just makes everything a hell of a lot easier, especially when it comes to painting these things later on, as you'll see. With all the parts now dismantled and neatly laid out, I can make a start on attending to my repairs. Let's start with the aspect that I really dislike, the sanding. To make this feel like I'm achieving something quickly with conspicuous results, and also to ease myself into this utter tedium, I gently buff the entire surface down. Just as with the previous Cyberman head repairs, I'm not actually trying to remove all the paint here. What I am trying to do though is give the surface a bit of tooth for the new paint to grip to later on. You can consider this as me using what's already here as a sort of base coat. Now, you recall me mentioning earlier on those unsightly blemishes? Well, there's some around the bottom of the pocket where the clear tubes attach, and a lot more on the backplate. If you look closely at it, you'll notice that the paint appears to have melted, and the only way to rectify this is to be a bit more aggressive than earlier with the sanding, so I'll work at it until the surface is smooth once more. As you can see, I've pretty much gotten down to the surface of the fiberglass here, but at least it's sorted and everything is now at a point where I can start effecting the actual repairs. So, it's time to crack out the filler and the resin. Right then, we're starting to get into the meat of the job here, where things start to become a little bit more interesting. Well, at least for me at any rate. Inside the handlebars are a set of metal threaded rods that allow these parts to be bolted directly onto the head, and when this prop took its faceplant, the right hand side hit the ground first and was forced backwards, which not only broke it in twain, but it also forced the upper threaded rod to break through the surface layer of the gel coat. To remedy this, first I removed all the loose material so that I had a stable base to work on for the repair pass. Next I mixed up a small batch of automotive filler and carefully packed it into the damaged area, being careful not to fill in the bolt hole. After about 20 minutes, once that had cured, I carefully sanded the filler flat until it was smooth and blended in perfectly with the existing fiberglass. Then I slowly began to carve out and file the bolt receiver hole. There, spot on. And now for the repair that you've all been waiting for. Probably the shattered handlebar. In the past, you've seen me totally rebuild and replace shattered resin handlebars, but this time around I simply don't have the option to do that. Firstly, because I don't have a replacement, and secondly because even if I did, the likelihood of it fitting this particular head would be pretty much slim to none, because each unit is bespoke and made specifically to fit one another at the time. As such, the only option that I do have available to me is to glue what's left back together and build up the missing material. I started by dry fitting both sections together in their original position relative to one another. Then once convinced that everything was correct, I went to Brown Alert, laid down a measured amount of CA glue and carefully joined the two sections together. I only had one chance at this, so I had to get it right first time. Thankfully, I did. Now comes the fun part. Using a grinding bit in my rotary tool, I very carefully roughed up the smooth as glass broken surface to give it a bit of tooth. Plus, I also ground out a couple of recesses. Doing this gives the new resin something to grab onto later on where, once cured, it'll act as a locking pin, permanently fusing everything together. Next, I took some clear plastic from some waste packaging and wrapped it around the brake before sealing off with tape to prevent any leakage. You do see where I'm going with this, right? Yeah, of course you do, of course. So, I mixed up the inevitable polyurethane resin and very carefully decanted it into the form, which I then left to cure off for about an hour. Once ready, I ground out the crack, followed by a quick pass of some filler to dress and conceal it, then I spent a bit of time sanding everything smooth, and this is the result. The handle has been returned to its original state, quite the success, and I'm really pleased with the outcome here. Now all I have to do is paint everything up, reassemble it, and I'll be done. I'm going to start the respray by lightly priming all the areas where I previously had to sand or make repairs. That includes the upper handle receiver on the top of the main head casting, the back plate, where the tubing inserts into the pockets under the earmuffs, and of course the entirety of the newly repaired handlebar. Once all that was dry, it was time to break out the silver paint and start to colour everything in. Now, the joy of spraying things like this while it's in its separate parts is that you can achieve a perfect coverage from all angles because now you have the opportunity to access everything without obstruction. Plus, you get to see if you potentially missed any areas as barriers like the handlebars just aren't in the way. I can see that this head was fully assembled when it was originally sprayed because all down the sides and fronts of the earmuffs, in particular inside the grooves, is a fair amount of yellow showing through from the original primer. This can happen so easily, and I've even done it myself in the past, but luckily I caught it before it went out to the customer. Here, it doesn't show up too well on camera, but the earhole cavities really do illustrate this problem. See how it's still quite yellowy grey in there? Clearly the affixed handles back then mask the spray path, and the same is true for the headlamp as well. Anyway, not to worry, I'll catch it all in this part and you'll never be any the wiser, unless of course you watch this video, that is. With everything nicely spread up to an even coating of silver, all I could do now was let this sit for a day or two, because the paint at this stage is still quite delicate and there's always the huge potential to mark and damage it whilst manhandling it as I put everything back into place. So it's best to just leave it alone for a bit. This is perhaps the easiest part of the entire job, and is probably just as satisfying. So everything you saw me do at the start of the video, I'm now going to do again, just backwards. On goes the headlamp, no drama here, it just bolts straight into place. And the same deal goes for the handle, though I am once again on brown alert as this manoeuvre has a potential to cause scratches in the new paintwork, or worse still for the repair to break. It shouldn't do, and in this case it didn't. Tidy. Now it's time to wield the hot glue gun about the place like I mean business. The first thing that I did was to put a small blob on each of the nuts that keep the lamp and handles in place. This just helps to prevent them from loosening off over time. Next, the brow blanking plate was returned to its original position, and the same goes for the eye mesh too. Lastly, I was going to hot glue the mouthpiece into position from the inside, just as it was when it first arrived, but in the end I decided to stick it from the outside as per how the originals were done. To me, this just looks a bit more authentic when done this way. And that, dear viewer, was it. It's all done now. Step right up, gather around now, don't be shy. Yes, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. Shameless plug time and a call to action, because that's what our Google overlords at YouTube instruct us creators to do. So just before I show you the repaired head in full, you couldn't do me a favour, could you please, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, that is. Also, don't forget to share this video, leave a like and make a comment, as I always love to read what you have to say. Plus, as a bonus, engagement like that really helps the channel, apparently. Lastly, there's also the super thanks if you're really feeling that generous, and that genuinely does help around these parts, especially with the purchase of materials for the various non-client based projects, but as always, don't feel pressured. Right then, that's your lot. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it, and until next time, stay safe, be happy, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care now. Excellent.